And we're live. 1 second. Are we?
I think we are.
Yes, we are. Welcome to Set Impact, where we discuss how emerging technology is changing sectors, society, and the world at large. For a brief period of time, for around about 6 weeks, I'll be speaking to founders solving some of the hardest and most interesting problems over LinkedIn Live. Today, we have Pandu, the founder and CTO of Panakeia, right? Am I pronouncing that right?
I'm not a Greek person, but apparently it's called Panakeia. But at this time and age, like we just let people decide how they pronounce the company's name.
Could you tell us about the vision and mission of your company, and tell us a little bit more about yourself as well?
Sure. So we actually just finished our first version of vision and mission statement. I can probably tell you that. So our vision is like we want to kind of like do this one-click precision medicine for everyone, everywhere. In terms of like how we want to achieve that, we are enabling accessible distributed healthcare by building rapid instrument-free precision diagnostic technologies for healthcare providers worldwide. So my background, or my background was initially, I would say I'm a computer science and mathematics person. I've done like a lot of research and development in, machine learning, mathematical modeling, biostatistics, drug discovery, drug design, all this kind of like jazz. I was working in academia and industry. I guess one thing that's very interesting, that's very relevant for this one is like, I was doing a lot of cancer research. Specifically, there's one kind of like project that I did whereby I was trying to predict the outcome of cancer drug treatment on cells, on cancer cells, by looking at the image alone, and that is actually quite related to what we're doing right now, whereby we're trying to correlate the visual of the cancer tissue to certain biomarkers profile, which actually kind of like dictate certain treatment/outcome of the cancer case.
That's really interesting, and essentially kind of let me know if I'm oversimplifying this, but augmenting the pathology process.
Yeah. So in a sense, we're augmenting pathology process. So just to give you context, how like the cancer journey on a very high level happens. It's like first you go to, or let's say start with the hunch of cancer in the body, and like all this radiography tests. You might have heard like things like CT, MRI, ultrasound, and they actually used to kind of like localize this hunch, like, oh, we see like calcification and let's say the upper left part of your left breast, things like that. And then they would actually take sample from that. And this whole kind of like laboratory processes involved, like, kind of turning that sample, like, human tissue sample into, I don't know, like a lot of people did this kind of like high school biology where they put like some sample or some tissue on top of like glass, and that's like literally what happens. And then they scan it actually in modern time. So you have something like high resolution image of the tissue. Think about like Google Map, but you're looking at tissue with a lot of like intricacies there. And this is then analyzed by pathologists who then commission, like, who actually come up with certain information, like, whether there's a cancer in the tissue, how different it is from normal tissue, because that's actually quite important in determining whether it's like aggressive or not, whether it's actually already spreading to other organ. And what happens after that is like a series of molecular and genetic tests are conducted. This test first is like, it takes a lot of time, as you can imagine. It's like a lab-based test, like anything that is lab-based always takes time. It's expensive because, again, it's lab-based, it's not computational. It's also prone to certain, like, I would say, inaccuracies. There's like overcalling, undercalling. We're looking at anywhere between 5 to 25% over and undercalling, which is actually quite huge thing about it. Like a lot of human process involved. And what we're trying to do is, like, by the time the sample is scanned, we already provide this like molecular genetic test information inferred by our technology. So when pathologists kind of like diagnose, like analyze the sample, then we just combine that, or like the pathologist can combine their analysis with our analysis and provide this full diagnostic information, which will then be used by pathologists, radiologists, oncologists, and surgeons to actually determine what kind of treatment should this patient actually get. And that's like basically what we were doing right now.
I mean, has your technology arrived at a point where it can provide the same results as a manual pathologist? Yeah, and I mean, and more generally, I mean, how do you see the role of the pathologist evolving, given the onset of a technology like yours, assuming it's going to be successful, of course?
Yeah. So in terms of like replacing the needs for molecular and genetic tests, like I guess it's like the general statement is like on the biomarkers. The biomarkers is like indication that you're testing against in cancer or any other disease. On biomarkers that are relevant for us, like the three biomarkers in breast cancer, ER, HER2. We're expanding to other biomarkers in other cancer types. On those biomarkers that are relevant for us, we already perform comparable, if not better than existing tests. We're looking at what our colleague from like German Cancer Center, like it's like someone who's very established in the field, would call it already clinical grade. So we're looking at 90 to 95% area under the curve. Like that's like our medical talk for performance of the model. In terms of like, so that's like quite good on I guess like the headline statement. We're trying to improve it. We're trying to increase our reliability, reproducibility. We're trying to explain how our model fails and where the model fails. Very important in medical diagnostic technologies. That's like what we're doing right now. In terms of like how that would change the I guess like how pathology as a profession will change with the advance of technologies like us is I guess without being a pathologist myself, I would say in general cancer diagnosis or like pathology work is becoming more precise in the sense that before you just look at the tissue and identify where is the cancer, and then you start understanding the difference of like all the whole spectrum of cancer tissue, from like some tissues that are very similar to normal tissue, some tissue that are pretty much like in a sense very different than normal tissues. You start understanding for example certain biomarkers, like there's one drug in breast cancer that's very very popular. You probably know that, like Herceptin, which is developed or like discovered like 20 years ago and started being used 15 years ago. Like nowadays, if you get cancer, most likely you will get like this three set of tests: estrogen receptor, progesterone receptor, and HER2 receptor. And what we're trying to do is like based on this, you would get very specific treatment. So and that is actually that would increase, like it will become more precise. People start using genetic tests to determine certain type of mutation that are known to be relevant for certain cancer patients. I guess it's like the way we saw it is like there would be more need for this precise cancer diagnosis. On the other hand, the world, or like we see that the pace of adoption, like the pace of adoption of the test doesn't grow with the need, in a sense, like the oncologists or like certain stakeholders that require more precise definition of cancer, but the system itself couldn't really cope. Like think about a lot of like tests that we are trying to replace. Actually, some of them are quite centralized. Like a lot of hospitals in UK don't even provide HER2 tests. So what happens is like they would need to send the sample to other center, like more bigger center, and that would first like take days, and that would be much more expensive, and that's like basically disrupting the whole patient journey. So and we see that there's actually the need for us to expand, whereby we are providing like one step precision cancer diagnostic solution by the time the sample is taken from the body.
And how long does it take for you guys to kind of spit out a therapy or a drug combination as opposed to the traditional process?
So for us, is like the answer. I mean, it's a bit like the way I answer you usually is like it depends how fast you want to be. Like we can provide that information literally within 5 seconds, but then that would require a lot of computational, like parallel computational power. In general, we achieve like the whole step or we achieve what the test usually comes up with within like 1 to 10 minutes, and that compares to hours, if not days, that the tests or the conventional tests are actually taking.
I mean, have you seen pathology differ in different countries and countries that aren't very well equipped to kind of handle cancer care? And I mean, from my limited understanding, apologies for this. How much is the limited number of pathologists a serious problem around the world globally? In the UK, we're privileged to have a lot of resources, so we think anyway. But if you look at remote parts of India, some parts of Africa, I mean, from my understanding, there are some countries that only have like single-digit pathologists, which is crazy. I mean, I guess the question is, I mean, how much is the limited number of pathologists? How much of a problem is it?
Sure. So looking at numbers, like generally developed countries have anywhere between, or like let's say one pathologist in developed countries serve anywhere between 10 to 30,000 patients. Well, that's like the average. Like countries like Australia has like larger or like less patient per pathologist. Like UK, it's like somewhere in the middle. And we're looking at like UK, Germany, all these countries. They're quite good at it. I mean, even in those countries, if you think about it, like pathologists are generally they're not enough pathologists, as you can imagine. Like it's actually one of the niche specialties. Not a lot of people working on pathologists. It's actually very, how should I call it? Like let's say, I think it's like the recent number I came across is like 50% of pathologists are above like 55 years old. So in UK, so we're looking at a lot of pathologists who are gonna retire. As a company, we've heard a lot of pathologists who actually came back from retirement to actually continue or support the hospitals or the system. And that we're looking at UK, and in other countries, developing countries, like things actually more severe. Like a lot of countries don't even have like their own version of RC pathway or Royal College of Pathology. So basically, if you want to become pathologist in those countries, you go actually UK. Looking at West Africa, there are like countries with tens of millions of population with less than 10, as you can imagine, like as you can see, pathologists. And India, a country that was like 25 times the size of UK, has pretty much the same amount of pathologists. And the way that the care is different is like, first, like it's much harder to get diagnosed for cancer, I can imagine. And second one is like they're actually being quite creative in a sense that there are a certain set of people who are doing pathologist work who are not like board certified pathologists, looking at like lab technician, biomedical scientist. I mean, UK start doing that as well.
Yeah.
I guess like there are concerns around that, like whether the person is qualified enough, etc. But then in that situation, I guess like the argument is like, would you get certain diagnosis or wouldn't you? I mean, would you get some diagnosis not necessarily done by pathologists, or would you not want to get any diagnosis? I guess everyone will answer like, I'd rather have something that's not perfect than nothing at all, right? So that's like, I think where for us is like kind of resonates very strongly. My co-founder is actually from India. I was born in Indonesia, like both countries with not a lot of pathologists, where cancer diagnosis and treatments are not that advanced, or like not as good as we hope to be, where in general we can actually make a lot of change. So one of like aspect of our vision is actually we want to provide it like everyone everywhere, and that includes actually providing it to rural area in India, rural area of Indonesia, all these islands, where actually, if you think about it, like they don't have pathology lab, because pathology lab is actually kind of high end. This is like a very difficult thing. Like you have a machine, they all need to be certified, they all need to be tested, they all need to be controlled, etc. Like it's actually very difficult things. While on the other hand, you see like nowadays, even people in rural India or even people in like small town Indonesia, they all have smartphone. So one of the things that we're trying to get like in the coming years, actually providing this capability whereby people actually can diagnose cancer on their phone. I mean, there's like open questions definitely, and that is like a bit what I would say like kind of like Google X kind of stuff. Like this is like something that we're trying to do that is even beyond everyone's comprehension, but that is something that we want to do, yeah. And hopefully we can solve this problem, because we see that our solution is computational. So as long as there is computing power, as long as there's like some kind of like quality control in place, and we've designed our system actually to be quite versatile in terms of like working in low resource environment, etc. And yeah, let's see how it would work in coming years.
One thing one thing I was kind of pondering just before we jumped on the interview was, how does, in an ideal world, how does your algorithm assist in prescribing the right drugs and therapies? And do you anticipate eventually your technology getting to a point where you'll be able to provide a much more nuanced understanding of the right combination of therapies and drugs that are required for each patient? I remember watching a TED talk actually just before I was preparing for this interview yesterday. And I think somebody that was trying to augment the pathology process in the US, and he mentioned that a lot of the time, a lot of the breast cancer patients that he had come across didn't actually need to go through chemotherapy. So I was just really curious to know how a technology, can kind of provide a better nuanced understanding of the therapies and drugs that are required for each patient.
Yeah. So I just to give you some context of like some background and history. I mean, without being a medic myself, but as part of our exercise of building the product, we learn a lot about how certain standard created, and sometimes it's like quite ad hoc or like quite arbitrary. Oh, this happens to be good differentiator between two cases. So they establish that, and then this been around for 50 years. People take it for granted, and the way I guess the modern medicine works is like more evidence based. Like you have certain hypotheses, you test it, you do like this complicated, rigorous statistical testing. You design the experiment so that's like kind of double blinded. There is less bias than you try to reduce bias as much as possible. And what happens is a lot of things that were established, like tens of like decades ago, people only recently like conducted the validation now, and they figure out actually it turns out there is actually a good differentiator on certain matter that they're trying to test. But I guess the way the medicine works nowadays, or the way we like to think, is like first, without like before we establish certain standard or something, we need to check actually how differentiator, like how predictive is this marker, like we call it, like any predicts, like that helps in that carries certain signal as a marker. And we realize actually increasingly, internally as well as externally, people actually start figuring out more complicated, more nuances marker. So the way it works is like in high level is like, can we actually separate this population into certain subpopulation, and so that this subpopulation would behave differently under certain treatment. Like think about it, like there are some people who respond positively to certain drugs and not, and that's like it's getting more complicated. And why we are quite bullish around our technology is like because our technology is kind of capturing these nuances. Thinking about like certain subtle difference, how the morphology kind of varies, like how the tissue looks like, how the tissue visual kind of like differs. Actually, we figure out internally it actually influences a lot of like downstream, a lot of like the patient's response to certain drugs. And one thing that we can do is actually, we have all this data, like kind of like longitudinal data, like a data that follows the patient, and the patients comes to the hospital. They were diagnosed with certain disease. They got certain treatment. They got the outcome information, and the person lives for certain years. And what we can do is like we can actually figure out certain signals that differentiate between patient who receives certain treatment, who responds positively and negatively. It's just basically trying to find differentiator between set of population. And like if I'm talking too complicated, just let me know. And what happens is like we can actually develop a lot of like biomarkers based on this information. Basically, you're looking at a set of population. That some certain part would do A, certain part would do B. Now it's like your task. Can you figure out what makes the person do A and B? That's basically the high level idea of modern biomarkers, and that's like what we're working actually.
And as we wrap up towards the end of our interview, I mean, uber optimistic world, 24 months from now, you have the resources, you have the funding, you have the talent that you need. What do you think what does your product look like? What do you think you'll be able to build, and what type of solutions do you think you'll be able to provide maybe hospitals, or what types of solutions do you anticipate being able to provide patients?
So we have actually planned like 18, 24 months ahead. I would call that, like, I would say optimistic, but not uber optimistic. You mentioned about uber optimistic. I guess, like, we want, like, the certain, like, the relevant biomarkers. So we're focusing breast cancer. We are expanding to colon and lung cancer, and we want first is like our breast biomarkers to be out in the market, to be approved. I mean, to be validated first, to be approved by the authorities. We're looking at European certification, FDA, and probably some other countries. There's like Canada, Japan, South Korea. They have like their own. They actually the common regulatory environment. We want to be used in the clinic. Think about NHS adopting our solutions. We are partnering actually with, I don't know whether you heard like the news last weekend, the government extend the funding like by further 50 million to 3 centers in UK. We are actually partnering with 2 of them. We want it to be adopted in the near future. We want to expand to other cancer types. Like we're looking, I mean, as I mentioned, right, it's colon, there's like lung, pancreatic. We want to actually expand as many biomarkers as possible. And I guess start thinking about not only looking at biomarker, but as you say, right, we want to be able to predict, to create our own biomarker, or like our own marker that is even better, or that actually like considers these nuances in patient, in lifestyle, in the background, all this kind of information that actually performs better, that it differentiates better. I guess, like, we want to start thinking about how can we deploy our solution in developing countries, as you say, right, India, like parts of Africa, Indonesia, all this country with limited amount of resources. And I guess it's like, start thinking about like how we can actually improve the diagnosis, or like the cancer diagnosis workflow better, because after 24 months we would have enough data and information to actually understand across countries, like what makes certain treatment, or like what makes certain intervention works. And going back to evidence-based medicine, we would have enough evidence to actually not only automate certain parts, but start thinking about optimizing the process itself, like the whole global view. And that's like what we want to achieve, basically.
That's amazing. Going on to a little bit more about yourself, what is your story, and kind of what made you start something like this? I understand you went through the EF process, but I mean, what was like the story leading up to this? I mean, was this idea, did you have an idea about this idea going into EF, or did you just meet Pahini and realize, what, I can marry my skill set up with this amazing individual? I mean, could you tell us about that journey? Because that's fascinating to me. Every founder I've spoken to from EF has said, I never really intended to start this idea until I went and met all these people. So yeah.
So for us, I guess there's like a mix between skill set, like happenstance, and certain backgrounds. So for me, it's like I've been doing a lot of research in cancer since as long as I remember. I guess like my grandparents died of cancer. My mom is like in remission of breast cancer. A lot of people in member of my family actually died or actually surviving cancer patients. And so it's been very fascinating for me. I've been trying to understand it, early on, using my background, mathematics, computer science, I tried to do a lot of like mathematical modeling of cancer genetic interaction, like all this, like trying to understand cancer on system level, basically moving towards drug discovery and design, basically figuring out, is there any part of like any molecules in the body that we can use to target known cancer, or basically can we actually develop something that we can use to target known parts of the body, basically. Kind of like moving back and forth between cancer research and non-cancer research, all like within my realm of ML and I guess like mathematical modeling or sciences. And at one point decided to do my own stuff. As you can imagine, like EF, just quit. For me, it's like I quit my job literally 2 months before moved to London. I was based in Germany and Switzerland before. Just like crazy step. I guess like kind of like quarter life, or like I don't know, like some kind of like crisis in myself. I want to own my own work. And at Panini, I was initially quite open about which idea I want to pursue, because my background enables me to solve pretty much a lot of problems. And for me, it's actually people pitching me, what kind of problem do you have, and let me see if I can help. But I met Panini, like she's a cancer researcher, like PhD postdoc, doing similar stuff, trying to discover and validate biomarkers. And I was doing pretty much the same thing, but on computational part. She was working on the wet lab, like biological science part, like trying to do all this experimentation. And we didn't even realize that we've been doing this pretty similar thing in our past life. And then we discussed about certain ideas, and based on this, there's actually a whole set of use case, or a whole set of use case of a family of use cases that is literally translatable from our experience, which is like providing this rapid like biomarker prediction, as well as automating various type of like pathology analysis. And we just build upon that. We figure out this is like something that we are very good at. We have all the contacts. We cannot understand the process better than most people. We appreciate the fact that cancer is something that is also personal. Like Paine also has her cancer scare, so I guess a combination of like personal call, ability, experience. I guess it's probably quite different than other founders, because even I was quite surprised that I would work on something that I was working before. I was actually coming in ready to do anything, but at the end I just returned to my field in a sense.
That's really interesting. And you went in quite open-minded. What was the story just before? Like you left your job and you just desperately wanted to start a company?
Yeah, I guess like I get tired of I keep joking. Is like I make people rich by working for them, but I never own that. Like there's like the lack of sense of ownership on things that I did. I think it's like I like to be. I'm quite proud on things that I've done before. A lot of things actually won certain awards, like things that actually are changing at least the company or the industry that I was working on. And I realized it's like there's something missing. At first, it's like I'm basically doing what people told me to do. Like, we have this problem, can you solve it? I guess like I can try to expand the horizon of the problem by saying actually there's like a similar problem in the other area, but at the end of the day, like I don't have any say on that. And second is like I guess it's like at one point the work transitioned from being creative to more. I guess this is like the irony from being creative to managerial. So at the end I was managing like engineers, scientists, the products itself. And I decided I want to go back to being creative. I guess the irony is like now I found a company. Now we have a company and I have to actually manage all these things. I barely become creative, but that things aside, actually I want to become creative. I guess like I'm quite creative in a sense, like Paine and I think a lot about strategy, etc., which is quite creative process, but it's not the one I thought before. But that's like one of the motivations. Actually, I want to become creative.
It's quite funny. Like, have you ever thought about like if you had hired somebody like yourself that has similar motivations to yourself? And have you thought about how to keep that particular type of person? It's a bizarre question, but like, for example, sometimes when you hire great people, they have these entrepreneurial urges, and a lot of great founders manage to keep them till the end. Have you thought about the environment that you have to create to retain talent similar to yourself, or and brilliant talent that may have an entrepreneurial urge in the future?
So we have like several examples within our company. People who are ambitious, who want to become like founder themselves, like later on. I guess like the way we work with these people is like, first, like being honest in a sense that you would be working. They all get options. Like we actually are quite generous in terms of options. They all get options. So in a sense, like if this one's successful, you will profit partly. On it. And second is like I was actually generally, or even Paine and I were quite honest about the fact that if you want to become a founder, this is probably one of the best way to learn the hoops on how to become a founder. Like achieving something and the least resources, with like a tight deadline, things never work, etc. Like, being creative, being resourceful, industrious, and basically kind of like depending on what they see themselves, like, what kind of founders, because as you can imagine, there's like different founders persona, right? There's like this, EF kind of like breaks it down nicely. There's like a talker, there's a doer, there is like domain, there's like people who are technologists and things like that, and trying to see where do they want to be, and basically guiding them in a sense, like on that path, like, if there's a skill that is missing. Generally what happens is like, it's good, like, I guess it's like founder should be like a T kind of person. You have to have certain area that you're very strong in. At the same time, you have to appreciate like the other parts of the area. Like, for example, if you force me, I can do like finance, for example, but I don't want to do that. It's not my strength. Or if you force me, I can do HR, but I'm not going to do that. I mean, probably if we really need it, I would do that. But like, founders need to appreciate this kind of like breadth of running a company, and correspondingly, this team member of us who want to become founder, we kind of like tell them this is probably something that you need to focus on, and basically challenge them. Those kind of people really love to be challenged. I was being honest with them, like, you would be working harder than other people in the company, but you will be learning much more, and you will be ready, let's say, within 5 years. And I guess like there's also like the last component, which is like honesty. Like, if they want to become founder, we appreciate that. And I'm not, I personally, I never expect people to stay till the company become like, let's say IP or get acquired. Like, basically, I want the person to be very, very impactful during their tenure in the company, and hopefully, in return for them being very useful or being very contributive to our company, I want them to learn like skills to become founder, and yeah, hopefully they will become a great founder, because like, I guess I personally see them as like, I guess like probably the biggest compliment, or probably one of the biggest achievement I can imagine, is like, if people within the company end up being founders themselves. But obviously, as a founder, as a founder of a company, we'd like to see them being useful for as long as possible. But at one point, is I guess like the way I thought about it when I quit a company is like, at one point, the return of you staying for one day in a company, once that is less than return of you, or probably not one day, probably 1 month, we need to average. The return of you staying for 1 month in the company is already less than return of you starting your own company. I think that's like a good point for someone to start their own, and I'm quite open-minded about it. Like, if anything, I would encourage people, once I realize actually you're not being quite useful sitting around here, than building your own company.
Yeah, and final question. I mean, and a question I kind of ask all founders: has there been any humbling moments that's kind of forced you to step back and reevaluate how you do things? I mean, from my brief understanding of yourself, I mean, is this your first rodeo into entrepreneurship?
First,
yeah. I mean, have there been any humbling moments, or like moments where you've had to really take a step back and reevaluate how you do things, or kind of check yourself, if you know what I mean?
So I wouldn't say humbling per se. I mean, I guess like we're quite lucky, like, I guess because Panini and I, we are quite a good fit into the solution that we want to solve. So like, in terms of like fundraising, etc., we never had like such a huge issue. Generally very strong team for a problem they were trying to solve. So I guess I realized a lot of problems on early stage founders, like first day founders. So we actually, we're very open about ourselves. We discuss things. We always discuss if there's a problem. So first is like the problems between founders. It doesn't happen. It's not actually materialized the way in other early stage startups. The problem related with finances, we don't also have that. So that's basically, we're safe from, I guess, to the two biggest problems in the early stage startup. I guess like the third one is like management. I'm actually I have very high expectation of everything. I told people actually, I guess like I have very high expectation on things. I demand a lot from people around me, and I also work hard. And generally, I expect people to work as hard as me, if not more. But I realize actually I'm a founder. I guess like Panini and I are founders. We work hard, but most people, they only get options, which is much less than what we have, right? start accepting the fact that people want to have work-life balance. For me, it's like my work-life balance is like when work and life perfectly combine together. Like that is amazing.
It's not
and for a lot of people that's not the case. I start appreciating that. Start appreciating that people also struggle. Like for me, it's like hard to relate. How can you struggle in a lot of stuff? But actually, people struggle, and start appreciating the fact that people are human. One thing I like, I often do to my team members, like I can like project myself on them, and that actually makes life quite difficult because like at least especially in the work that I used to do, because I was quite good at that, I would project myself there, and I realized actually I don't think that makes sense. People have their own faith, people have their own background. I couldn't expect people to do the things the way I would do, or expect. Start appreciating the nuances in work. There's someone in like one of our team member who was actually having a lot of health issues. Before I didn't even realize that there was a point in my life where I was like half dead and I was still writing emails and trying to get things done, but I don't think that's healthy. So for me, it's like the learning exercise, or the learning things that happens, like actually start thinking about, start appreciating other people's, and start to see yourself, not projecting, but see yourself in their position. What would happen if you have kids and things like that. And that is really actually very I would say like a very good personal growth exercise, because and also people realize that when they realize I am actually putting myself on their position, and I'm being appreciative, I'm being like receptive, people realize that. And I guess it's like probably well established at this point, like if people feel appreciated, they would work harder. So in a sense, actually good things for me to be able to understand people's circumstances, because by being understood, they would actually felt that they're being appreciated, and therefore they work harder. So
yeah, I can understand, and to some extent definitely relate. As we close the interview, I mean, is there anything you want to shout out? Are you fundraising? Are you hiring? Partnerships you want to acquire, etc.?
So we I think Paini will give a talk. Paini will join you at one point. I think she would have some very interesting announcement. I'm just like chatting with you right now. Like you have questions. I guess like the interview with Paini will be more interesting, because we have some announcement to make. We have some progress we want to announce. Like just to give you I guess like a peek review, we're planning to publish our first paper, and that would be like basically a validation, or like a proof point of what we've been doing. We claim all these numbers. We're actually quite rigorous internally in terms of like when we say something, it's gone like actually through the entire process. It feels very bureaucratic sometimes, but we're a medical diagnostic field. But at one point we want to actually show the world, okay, this is the number, this is the method, this is the standard, and hopefully that would be published in the near future. And yeah, I think Paini can tell you more about that.
Okay. Awesome. Are you hiring at any point?
We are hiring. Actually, we have one ML engineer position we would like to fill. Yeah, actually, yeah. If you know, or if anyone who's watching this know, or looking for a job themselves, just reach out. I guess like my name is there. I actually prefer like personal email than I mean, I don't know whether you realize we haven't posted our job ever. The reason is like I'm a very personal person. Whenever someone applies, actually I always have this 30 minutes coffee, or like nowadays just like a chat, trying to understand the person. I actually still do everything myself. So yeah, if someone wants to reach out to me, more than happy to entertain the interest.
Amazing. I really appreciate you jumping on this morning from Istanbul. I hope you enjoy your vacation, and really appreciate you jumping on. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Cheers.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.